Hey, everybody. I'm Chris Metzler, one of the programmers of SF DocFest. It's been a weird time, but we're glad to kind of get to our 20th edition of SF DocFest. We've been bringing kind of the most interesting, eclectic, and independent documentaries around the world for 20 years, which is hard to believe. But we have a really great slate in store for you this year. And you just had an opportunity to see the great documentary, The Revolution Generation. And we're lucky enough to have one of the co-directors, Josh Tickell, here. So thanks again for being here, Josh.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and thanks for playing the Revolution Generation.
Most definitely. Well, I think it's a really interesting kind of artful story. And one of the things we love about film festivals is not get a chance to screen the film, but get a chance to kind of pull back the curtain and find out a little bit more of the process and what inspired you to make the film. So maybe that's a good place to start. How did you kind of hook up with this idea and decide like this was the movie you needed to make?
Yep. Well, as you probably know, my wife Rebecca and I have made films together for a number of years, 14 environmental themed movies. This is the 14th. And, when we started with Fuel, our first film in 2008, Sundance Audience Award film, that film went to 150 colleges. So 2008, we're talking to people who are 18, 19, 20 years old, right? 150 is not a small number of colleges. That was a year of our life. We basically did that. And what we, who weren't that much older, started to realize is there was a huge gap between the way we viewed the world, and certainly our parents, and the way this next generation of people viewed the world. And it was this combination of like digital efficacy, equality, justice, and environmentalism. And the questions that were asked during the Q&As were amazing. And teachers would say, look, I can barely get students to sit still for 30 minutes. How do they sit through an 111-minute movie and then an hour and a half Q&A? And we just kept going, we're not sure. But over the course of that year, we really came to believe that the line between Generation X and millennials was so intense and so stark, and that within the millennial generation, there was the nexus of new things that could produce the kind of activist generation that comes around once every 80 or 100 years. And that was the inspiration for doing more investigation, and eventually for making the Revolution Generation movie.
So we got a little bit of a Zoom hiccup there.
Oh no.
So, but we got you, so that's good. So I'll cut this part out. And so, as you started kind of approaching, some of the folks that you wanted to kind of showcase in the film, I mean, were they open to wanting to kind of tell a story to somebody outside of their own generation? And was there any hesitancy of just, or more of like ownership of like, hey, I want to tell my own story, How did you kind of encourage people to get on board, and how also did you, for lack of a better word, cast your film?
Well, the film started in the wake of 2016. We started kind of filming around the time that the sort of the fallout of the election was happening, and just the country was in extreme upheaval. So people were interested in talking, but there was a lot of uncertainty, like, how is this film casting these issues? How am I going to be positioned in this grand scheme of things? But overall, I would say 9 out of 10 people were willing to go on camera, the people we wanted to talk to, and they're willing to talk about the issues. And, one of the big issues in the film is Standing Rock. We go back and we cover that from a slightly different perspective. And that kind of sets the tone for a lot of the second half of the movie. The first half is a lot of setup. It's a lot of, here's where we've been, here's what's happened. Second half is kind of this line of like, wow, 2016, man, things really started to get very real right about at that moment. And the country and the world shifted after that, as was the prediction. I mean, this is the Sioux prophecy. The Lakota, Nakota, Dakota prophecy is when the black snake crosses the land, a time of great troubles will begin. Well, you can pretty much go back to the point that that pipeline, the Dakota Access Pipeline, was completed, and go, wow, that was a turning point for us. Like, basically, everything unraveled after that. And so, in terms of casting the film, as we were filming the film, these events were happening in real time. And we were going, we think we're doing a movie about generational differences and activism, but we're not sure how it's going to work out. And most people were like, okay, you've done good movies. I'll give it a whirl. And that was the beauty of people trusting us with their voices and really being very open and very heartfelt for the most part of the film.
With as you kind of were filming all these stories and around the world, is like, what was the kind of so you had you could say what was the kind of visual approach that you wanted to take, or aesthetic that kind of you could kind of like weave together these different vignettes and stories, and what is it that you wanted to kind of reflect, I guess, as both a filmmaker, but also, for the people's stories that you were telling?
Yeah, I mean, we tried to get a sense of the world changing. That's where we were trying to sort of focus the cameras. The film is obviously as heavy on archival and sort of real-time news footage as it is on things that we actually filmed. We wanted it to be intimate. We wanted it to be personal. We wanted it to be true as much as possible to real-world events. And, to the best of our ability, we did something like that.
Well, I think it's a really interesting film of just like the ideas that, get to circulate in your head, and it's very immersive in that way. Was there anything that kind of surprised you over the making of the film, and now that it's done, when we kind of step away out of the theater in front of the laptop, like what's the kind of takeaway that you want, people of all ages, I guess, to kind of keep in mind?
The biggest surprise for us, the biggest surprise in making the film was this concept of the fourth turning, that there are these generational arcs, right? There are these 4 arcs that keep repeating themselves over and over in Western civilization. And look, no one has a crystal ball. No one can predict the future, but we can see patterns. And historically, we're in the 4th part of the pattern. What was surprising to us is as we started making the film, we were like, oh my gosh, this lines up perfectly. The 2008 financial crisis and just the accelerating chaos from that point. And so the big takeaway is that the fourth turning is not over. And how it plays out, or how it has played out historically, has determined the next 100 years each time. So, as we look at the world, we go, oh my God, there's so much conflict and climate change and COVID and, politics and all this stuff, and it feels overwhelming. But then you can look on the flip side and you can go, yeah, and look at young people running for office, and look at how they're taking over Congress, and look at young people making a change with environmental issues, and look at how they're just taking on bold initiatives to clean the ocean and sequester carbon into soil through regeneration, and these huge things that mostly are fueled by young people. This generation has the chutzpah, they have the tools, and they have the sort of like, I'm not going to get into the corporate golden ring of society. That's a dream that came out of the World War II post-industrial complex. Maybe instead, I should use my life to make a difference. Great idea. And so I think the big message is, it ain't over yet. We're not through the crazy part yet, but how we act collectively will determine where we land as a society. And it's going to be 5 or 10 more years, and things are probably going to get a little crazier before they smooth out. So I personally wanted the film to end with a very hopeful and very powerful, but very practical kind of call to action. And that's what it is. Look, this is the largest, youngest, best educated generation in the history of the planet with the most energy toward changing things. Now is the moment to do that. Now is the chance to really forge history.
Well, it definitely leaves you on a hopeful point in the sense of knowing that at least that there's people that care and can make these changes, and we'll all benefit from it if we kind of allow it to happen. As we wrap up things, if I remember correctly, you wrote a book also kind of on a similar subject. Is that right?
Yeah,
And
there was
usually I like to ask filmmakers of like, okay, well, if we're interested in the subject matter, how can we help spread the word about the film, but also what can we do to kind of learn more? So can you tell us a little bit more, like what inspired you to write the book and at what point in the process did that happen?
It actually happened before the movie. The Revolution Generation was a book idea, and my publisher was like so interested in it. And as we went into it, I was like, gosh, this is so progressive. I don't even know if people are going to get it. It's like, I was like, you should really publish this other book called Kiss the Ground, which is, this is the formula for what we talk about in the Revolution Generation. The Revolution Generation is about changing the world, saving the environment, and this is how we do it. And the publisher's like, I don't know about Kiss the Ground. I think the Revolution Generation is going to be a hit. Turned out to be the other way around. Kiss the Ground was the hit, and Revolution Generation, the book at least, was the sleeper, because we were too far ahead. We were ahead of, Black Lives Matter. We were ahead of, kind of ahead of Me Too. We were ahead of a lot of these movements, and people couldn't quite see it yet. I think if the book came out today, it would be a bigger success. But for people who want to go down the rabbit hole and learn more, it is available. The Revolution Generation book. It's it's in bookstores, it's on Amazon, all those places. But for the real tools to save the world, this is the one. Kiss the Ground. The book is that's the good stuff there as well.
Cool. Well, thanks for making the film. And I just encourage everybody out there is that we're lucky enough that, the filmmakers, share films like this with us at Screen Festival. And so you're out there, you're the filmmaker street team. So, go on social media, tell them about this great film, The Revolution Generation, that you saw, and hopefully get a chance to bring it to other cities around the world.
That'd be great. That would be great. Also, we're excited about finding a good distribution partner for the film. We're in that process now. So hopefully coming to a place where you can share it with your parents, which is what everybody asks. When can I share this with my parents? The answer is soon.
Awesome. Thanks again, Josh, and thanks for being part of SF DocFest.
Thanks for having us.